Good morning, Katrina.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rinpoche, Losartashi Dele, and good morning, Katrina. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for translating for us today. And welcome to everyone online. I'll begin with some prayers. The link is in the chat box. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one thus gone, the foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world's supreme guide to beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme sign, space like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land stand and offer to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Amen.
Jigsamgem.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Ne. Kanshi section somba ye kenda temba lana me. Kawa tenjin jebare jom section tomba de la. Oh yeah. Ta karso. Cheni de kulon de. Cheko doa. Yendi chedi ko karso. Dona chingo doa. Kyo mangbola temba do. Kyo mangbola tereche. Kyo se. Sendele tewa da. Kyo chima penselia temba.
Recording in progress.
Udoa.
Kogidu.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, this one's a carsore. Golude. Sendelia, the carsore. Ranging Mene, Chanelia, and do Chenella, can't you never say. Men at saw me somebody. She was tambourite. Oh, in the 7 Sendela Rangla, and Shala. Jine Chimaliana, me, Julia. Oh, Tinashi. Sendelia. You are Chima, social round member. Ishi Chine Chidu, the court at the Locora. Teletare, Tandalia, take you so in your morova. You quando tangar, tanga, some so much some you may get it. I get a trato, Jansim da, Tonjunda, or Tendin Yamoto, call Koshiki, you saw there, this one. Nirin Messenalia, quando tanga, trato, Jansim. You make you some teaching Harvest of Shagua. Oh, yeah, they did get a Mayba. Ranchibu Dewat, Ranchibu Toma Babana Sustibu, Samutan Dera. It on the Kuchema to your Betty. That delay some of Chasher. They to make the travel the same jet, to make the chair. The Duji Tawal and Gwebestito. Naragit and never used to work on it. Kanda Drava Yoba, Kanda Cook of Chomatelia. And those you never Kunde. Landor Junet, Tamji Shivers, Landor Junet, Tamji Shivers. You couldn't enjoy some. And then you're Messinalia. You're Narina Papa, and then Narina Rangula. Give it to Shishora. Oh, today Kulon this set them. They will lam to Suliang, Tebata, Sambata, Combat, Rimji Chavinism, Kulon, the voice of summertime, and the Sena, around the society, one of Lamiko, Harvard, something to be Kulon. Oh, today could do a Kulon set them.
So, to begin with, Geshe made the praise to the Buddha who has seen and taught this dependent origination. And by teaching it to us, it is what allows us to as well achieve peace. And so in a sutra, it describes this Dharma. The Dharma is what brings benefit and happiness to beings. So the Dharma is what is able to bring us benefit and happiness, both to ourselves and others, not just in this life, but in future lives. If we have this kind of an understanding that we aren't going to cause harm to any other beings, and we're going to, as much as we are able to, bring them benefit, do positive sorts of actions, this will be beneficial to ourselves and those around us, as well as planting the kinds of seeds for taking a good rebirth in the future. But looking at this process of rebirth, of uncontrollably taking body after body without any sort of control, we see that the root of all of this is our afflictive emotions, our kind of grasping at a self, our sense of anger and competitiveness, jealousy and pride, and so forth. And so recognizing that if we are to eliminate those kinds of afflictions that cause us to take such uncontrolled rebirth, we can get out of that cycle of suffering. And so making the kind of effort to eliminate our afflictions with this sort of a goal is the level of a being of middling capacity. And then recognizing that it's not really suitable to just think about ourselves, that it isn't just us who is in this cycle of taking uncontrolled rebirth, but rather it's all sentient beings. And so seeing that, we give rise to an attitude of wanting to gain a state in which we have eliminated all of our faults and developed all good qualities, such that we have the knowledge of all the points of what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned in order to be able to bring benefit to others. And so with that kind of motivation, we should on a daily basis strive to eliminate all of the various faults that we have and try to develop each good quality. And the ability to do that is dependent upon listening to the Dharma. So we should set a good motivation, thinking that we are listening to this Dharma, maybe for a good rebirth in the future, or to be able to attain liberation, or for the state of Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And that kind of a motivation will create the causes for such a result to come about.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to some detail. Takpa tiksu chiba, tanda kondo ya ndosarwa, takpa takpa tiksu ser ndoswa. Takpa sayde chidan ko kechi judan kengi wangi rangli ya njua, judan kengi wangi rang pa neya tiliya, pendo che mekwe ba ne tunge chiba ko takpa sigira. Mato takpa ri shiwe ngeba ke yo mara, tu tu tenge ke ko mara. Kora ngo chupti sa. Ngō chūpa te kūtā kēngi hōngi kō nēpa shē kūku mē na, nē tākwa shīgirā. Kī kō kacē tēnā te rē mā tō, kī tāk tō tēngi tēn rē kī kō mā rā. Tākwa shī, mē tākwa shī dē kō, kēchī kēchī rā pā, kūtā kēngi hōngi, kēchī kēchī rā rāngi ngō tē nē tō pa shīngi tē. Rāngi ngō yu kīng tī mā, kīng tū shē tē tō tē, kūtā kēngi shiāngwā chē nē tō kuyā tē rē mē tākwa shī kō rā. Titi ngara so metaba raba toso de ngusung de tongu towa. Mindreshine kendroa, shingdreshine medo ina karen juan doa de raba de haku doa. Ina te kichi ling juan doa yore. Hop te kale, tuichik dun juan gen doa yomara. Chawe metaba de ngara singi yomara, o ti keshara. Ya tichi lakshana.
So here, as far as where we have arrived in the text, this is on page 69 in the English. And here we're talking about the distinctions between the words takpa and tersuk. And so here, the word takpa, which we usually translate as impermanent, is not so much something remaining forever as thinking about it as being established by its own essence. So if something is Thabkhe as a permanent, it is not benefited or harmed by causes and conditions. Being that it is established in its own essence, it remains that way without being dependent in any way on causes and conditions. And this is opposed to things which are impermanent in the sense that they are dependent upon causes and conditions. So the continuity of something impermanent can continue for a long time, but it is dependent upon that momentary accumulation or aggregation of causes and conditions. And so when it comes to understanding impermanence, we can see a kind of coarse impermanence, that things change, like that tree gets bigger or we get older or flowers rot, whatever it may be. But that kind of momentariness, that subtle impermanence of things changing moment to moment, we are unable to apprehend that.
Oh yeah. Oh, the indico Rangwine Truba, Rawando Truba Shura, Rangwine, Rangango Yobam, Rangwine, Rangshinki Yoba de China, Jura Meba Tapa Ingu Yode, Jura Meba Singores, what you don't get the Shanda, the person then you can walk to Yomara. You didn't do Tapa to work. Rangwine Truba Yenaya, Tapa Ingu Yore, and do some Salia, Rangwine Truba Laya, Tapada. Tende tawatila takta serve. Tende sungura takta ser, takta lons, takbar tawa ser. Tende sungura. Yedin dile tanda tiga so takba na tirsu cheba sedera. Tirsu se takba sedeta. Samsanglia ngama di manjur se tanda. Tujin wangi jua masif se tanda tede ne takba de diora. Tirsu se de takba le koya yore ya samsanglia. Tanda yobate maumbalia, begin to Mogochoko net and get a letter suit, Rekuyora. Yawadis election.
So here, sometimes this word takpa, which is really permanent, if something is like objectively established, is inherently established or established from its own side, then it is something that is unchanging in the sense that it doesn't depend upon causes and conditions. If it has that kind of inherent existence, then it is something which is unchanging. So we often see this term permanent applied to that kind of a view and to that extreme of permanence when we hold to things as though they are enduring or kind of unchanging. So permanent in this term takpa can also have the sense of something that in the present did not depend upon causes and conditions. It is sort of permanent in the sense that its essence, its nature is already established, and therefore its existence is not dependent upon anything else. Whereas this term tersu can have the sense of being something that is enduring, looking to the future. It will remain, not being dependent or benefited or harmed by various causes and conditions. So sometimes these can be synonymous, and sometimes there's more of that sense of one referring to the past and one more referring to the future.
Oh yeah. Agbadan Tirsu Chebase. You know, Kode Chibe want to Chebe Neko, Jura Mebala Kochores, Niga Tabal Kochores, Jua Mebala says. Come there is it on the town Delia. Ondo Dona Sumbe Tabada Tirsus and get Esigora. Come there Chunam Rangingi Truba and Nashi Shembala, Tagba Tirsu de Sonase. And the Kondo Soya and Dona Soya Tabas at Tirsus. Chunam Rangingi Truba now Dado Rangingi Truba Zibatelia, and Zibala Nashi Shemba. Shembala Tagba Tirsu de Sonase, Tagba Tirsu de Sonase, Rangingi Truba, now Tato Ramone Yoba Zibatilla, Tagba Tirsu de Sonase, Esiora. A Shesong by Yeshi. Then I show them Rangingi Yona, you'll me do never shikubes. Ramone Truba, Rangingi Truba Yenako, Joa Menge, and it's so to never square, Piquebe, and it let Takwas Sunguores, that are so by Yeshi. Then I show them Rangingi Yoba la Tata Sigdo. Chunam Rangingi Yoba tele Tata, Tabetala. The Tawa tele Tatala Loa, Tabartawa, Tida. Oh, Tedar Tawa la Tata. She Sombatabu Yense. Yatibo to Chilabna, huh?
So, here picking up in the text, it says the Tibetan words Thabkhe and Tersuk sometimes have the same meaning and sometimes have different meanings, have a different meaning. So, when synonymous, these two both mean unchanging. In the context of this sutra citation, the Buddha uses the phrase apprehending phenomena as permanent and enduring. So here, this is again sort of glossing the sutra passage that we had above. This is being used in the sense of in reference to phenomena appearing to be inherently established and then apprehending them to be so. So in the context of using these words for phenomena having some sort of inherent existence, if they had that sort of inherent existence, they would be unchanging, as in permanent and enduring. And this is referring particularly to them appearing to be inherently established and then apprehending them to be so. The Buddha made this statement because once phenomena exist inherently, they must remain without changing. And so here, again, if they had some sort of inherent existence, phenomena would not be subject to any kind of change. It is as if the Buddha first explained that the extreme of permanence refers to phenomena existing inherently, and then said that the view of permanence refers to this extreme.
Oh, yang kap gala sigura, shungi kap gashi ngar ju chutin juwa meba tata neba tala, takba asira. Ani ngar ju chutin juwa meba tata neba tala, takba asira. Takba tanga. Tade chutin manjur che maung bala nenge chine tirsuusi. Otin riyan kotin takba da tirsu nide so. Kotin drekwe beka bayan yore esi, yotosi. Otin
So there are other instances, though, where Thabkhe and Tersuk must be interpreted to have different meanings. So this is where Thabkhe, permanent, would refer to a former phenomena abiding in the present without having changed, kind of looking to the past, whereas Tersuk refers to a present phenomena remaining in the future without undergoing change. So more a sense of enduring and going forward.
Oh yeah. 공기 도단 자와 파된 다와 잡에 시제벤 제발레 야송 되시기도 공돈도 장사를 너나 가르송 거르세나 그 랑원에 요 말에서 랑원에 요바 나와데 추나레스 이나 지단테 나와데 강거 추나 말이 요레스 요주요 랑원에 요바데 매바 말이 요레스로 어디나시 파된 다와 잡에 시제벤 제발레 송샤서라 띵일레 대대스 어디 dinner trade kashe chedesha original condemnation edese ade chesha telase mindu ede rangshi mena sedwa ede tela rangshi mena chishi yeche na se rangshi gi me segdo ne ta karayo rese na segora chebare chade so labge shegi sora kankune nyomu bata number chawe churu chebe se kune nyomo choge kunju temba de tunge temba sero to nyomo chote ra namba changwe chongo de lamde de kewala so to chote gora kune nyomo bada number changwe juru chebe se de ya yan de chesha ngo tenjen debar jongwa de se chindwa juru chebe langs nam santi dwa tipedu juru chebe Juru ngose tenjen debar jungwa te yola se tenjen debar jungwa te yore se jumar chebe lambu cheda jumada jumagi kengi tu shebe langje da meda tende tuba tuyo chu che lambu ta jumar chebe se de yan che lambu ta tala sokba ta drawa te yan chiba chinji lokba ta ge rāngshīn dā jēbāngi dō yōngsū tōku wōsē. Yūma kēngi tālāng rāba tī rīt tūwa hēne kō tātā lāngbō ngō nē chī yū ngō nē dō samsā samgī rwa chūyī chē. O tī dāngshī chū tam chē rāngshīn kī yōba ngā rā dō samgī wā rē sō rā. Phākba nām jē nē rāngshīn kī mēba ngū sūn dō sī sā dī yūma dā mī chū lā sōkba tā rā sē. Yūma kēngi tī wōshī tālāng tō tū nē kō Talando Namado Me, some Soso Haku Yora. Oh, Tomata, Migula Sogbata, Ranshim Beba. Chita Washindo Yonso, Chuto Ose, Tonto Chugri Kingri Series, Shagas. Yakibot.
Mhm. So here then, in keeping with the sutra passage above, the glorious Chandrakirti states in his commentary on the 400 stanzas. Now here in the quotation that follows, there is a little bit missing from the Tibetan, and I think it may have also been sort of missing from the English. So here, again, the issue arises from the sutra passage quoted above. If there is no inherent existence, then what does exist? If phenomena are not existent from their own side or objectively existent, then are they completely non-existent? And so here the response comes in that they do not exist sort of as they appear. It's not all appearances, however, that are being negated. So the answer says, I will explain. Phenomena that serve as the sources of virtues and afflictions exist. Now here, I think it should be saying that phenomena whose nature are dependent arisings. And here, this is referring to everything that exists on the kind of afflicted side. So the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin of suffering, as well as on the thoroughly purified side. So we often see that translated differently as than virtues. But so all of that which is on the purified and the afflicted side exist with this nature of being dependently originated. They are similar to illusion-like horses, elephants, and so forth. And so I think there's something that's missing from the Tibetan here, but I think it all got into the English. So here, ordinary persons mistakenly understand them to have inherent existence. So like when a magician conjures up illusory horses and elephants, for ordinary beings who don't understand that those are just sort of magical illusions, they hold them to be as they appear. And this is how ordinary persons are. They hold things to have this kind of inherent existence. Whereas noble beings precisely understand them to lack inherent existence and to be like a magician's illusions, a mirage, and so forth. So this is the sort of difference in understanding between those who are ordinary persons and Aryas or noble beings.
Oh, yeah. This one. Kondo Doda Tenjule Sumbatarse. Tatalia Dosara. Rangshingi Me. Yena Yore said that is Shayora. Yakashi. Oh, Mendra Shenda Yugodo. Dandamle Chedu Rangshingi Man to the Mare say. Then it about some to you. Tension Revolution want some to you. But the Yoba Kochu Mares or West, which you are at in Nashimares, Yoba the Yoba Chachi to get your days. Rangwin married at the Sobol and its legaching it is with Tilia, who Yoba Shaku race this Ungora. Oh, teach election.
So here, as it will continue, just as it is said in the above sutras and commentaries, whatever appears to us, such as the production of phenomena and so forth, appears to exist inherently and from its own side. So there are those who, when they hear that things are not inherently existent, rather than understanding that they're merely existent, they fall into their being totally non-existent. To have that level of conventional existence or merely designated existence, for them it doesn't suffice as existence. And so there are those who then would say that if phenomena are not inherently existent, they don't know how to posit their existence otherwise.
Oh, Kondo Doda Tenjule Sumbatarse. Raja Namlase. Doda Tenjule Sumbanashi. Razu Tadus and Chutu Rangwine to Nawadi. Nawanashi Yomares, Ina Tawane Meba Mare, Chawachingachi Yores, Sungura, or Sumbataris, Chunam, Yawaso, Kanawa Nams, Yawada, Sutra Rachel Sobakarinawana. Ranshingi Yobada, Rangwine, Yoba Nashi, Tedershebaela, Kurangwine, Ranshingi Yoba, Rangwine, Kurangwine took to Verach. Nangaranga years and Gesurich, Razul Pachashana. Not just some good topo, the same that's what was a passion. Ranchi no shirkdo, Rangwine, Garanga use Rangwine, Susumuni, Kayomara, Shendala tension journey, any tapa samla, any tasta, Kapumba Kambala Shagu Yodo. Rangwine Yoba Nashi, Tedar Shemba in Las. Yede Chunam Tajala, Rangwine Truba now at Tedar Yoba Yinase. Rangwine Truba now, Nashi Rangwine Yoba Yina. Mama Namjishidar Debatar. Dini Pumbo, Dini Kansago, she, Tanya Tagwe, Teni, Kanyese, Roboma, Zogo, Ramune, years ago, Umaba, Tenjuatabutada, Shashanara, Mobana Ramune, Mesam, the Shechiripada, Number Sanjiva to the most, sometimes Ramune, Yogode, Ramune, Senichi, Rice, Man, and never do this, Sogora, oh, Chizati, Chidar Debati, Mama, so conducive to the essay. Yede chunam tajala rangune truba nawa tar tar yoba yena ngoma nam je chidar deba dar deni phungbo ose na chiruba da chena ko ta de chena ni jore nangi ta se aba tirsu chi yore se ta singe ro ni ha kashe nangba yena ko phungbo nga ga de ta re se ro ya kashe sna mare phungbo nga ga mare kunshin nam she se semde sim yundu de denge sim chiware o ti are sarub de chi re ta de se ne re shavi ware ani kashe se chiruwa se nang ta da chi to de ta se gore sti chire nang ta se na lo ya nang chi be chus na lo ko be na lo chi yo denge chiware sam de sam ki wara nga de chi yo ko to ma to de bu yo ma ro chi yo ko sam ki wara uma ba chene de yo mara Nangina Tadis, Kogana Jutangris, Yomara. But even any Tagi Chawach to Lakwe Chawach, Sogwe Chawach to Tagi Chawach Sora. Kogana Jutang Tajin, Kulega Yomara. Tagi Chawach, the Lutanga, the Yita, Simdan Soa, the Dushikanga Chawach, the Tagi Chawach Shawura. Yediko, Tadi Surgil Tedangis, Umbule losses Chivarani, Yesu Chawach, the Tagi Chawach, Rumara. Oh, tadi kristal mambula bin sabsa tegi. Oh, chidan deba. Tagbe te denye kai. Number chede sewe din shi ni ju yo gura. Rangune yo na. Ta kadire se tak seba che seba se da tuktuba. Ngadi be tuktuba koran chi yo na kagire se dire do ase chi tende tigdi je chilfa zu su se chi yo gura. Oh, tende yo ma resi gura. Rangune yo ne tende chi yo gura. Rangune yo mari, Rangune yo na chene nye gore. Tahina da karine, ngobu kandishine ko chene tandiri sha se nye ju yo gore se gora. Yo ba da dine kansa ko, si tangye takbe tuende kanyi, nambar che de, chewe se. Kansa se tashi, tudu, chiri, kargare, John se ming takbe te, yon kadire se, chena. Diri sha si raya shi kore si rangune yo na. Tseni nye yo mara rangune, tseni nye meta rangune me res. Ana ko me ribe so me mara tene takwa tsamsha. Pumbu nga bu karuna tene taha spa takore. Mi tondi sobu dachi tene ming taharwa. Tina shi tashi tudu John karkar sigi na. Pa tene takwa tagdwa. Tetsamla sha gore si gora. Tadi dili takwa si. Sobul takwa mare, semla takwa mare. Tezu chershi chedi paa tasha yora. Tene takwa asigdwa. Tene takwa. Sobu ta semda soa da tezu lega chebdi taga lega cheba shagura. Taan rukudu, tekidu, nagidu, kanga shagudwa. Taa singi chi pe losu chi yone sobu nana taa nagi yo maro. O tindi riti yo ma, tindi. Tewendi shingi ju yogo las. Uma tenjuwa namjini. Yadar tsewe menye be chu nam rangune yobar. Nawa di chube nawa mayimbar shedo oso te tahi gendo swa. Tongze changma de chuna ribe sudu. Changma chuna mati tina chube cha yore ma chi yobe cha che yore sunga. Ya tibo tikilan.
So here again, just as it is said in the above sutras and commentaries, whatever appears to us, such as the production of phenomena and so forth, appears to exist inherently and to exist from its own side, and we then apprehend it as such. So as it's explained above in these sutras and the various commentaries, that phenomena appear to us as though they have this kind of objective existence from their own side. And we apprehend them then to have that kind of existence as though they had that sort of inherent or objective existence. So all that appears to us, all of the various forms and sounds and so forth, they appear to have that kind of existence. And as though, even though they appear as though they exist from their own side, in their own right, it's not as though they actually exist in that way. So it says, if a phenomena that appears to us to exist from its own side did indeed exist in this way, then just as the essentialists assert, by examining and searching for the object implied by the conventions, this is an aggregate or this is a person, we would be able to find it and say, this is it. So again, if it were the case that a phenomenon actually existed in the way that they appear to us. We have these appearances of persons and pots and pillars and so forth, and they appear to be sort of objectively existent from their own side. And for the essentialists, so again, this is non-Buddhist schools who assert some sort of like a permanent self, and also those lower tenant holders all the way up to the mind-only school, they would say that we have to have some kind of inherent existence, this intrinsic or inherent existence, that when we search for something, when we say this is the object, one has to be able to find that. So if you try to point out what the self is, I mean, for some non-Buddhists, it's something that is outside of these aggregates, or it could be something that they see as being like within the aggregates. There are Buddhist schools that assert that it's like all 5 of the aggregates, or that it's something like this foundational consciousness that is the self that we can point to and say, yes, that is it. Now, for the Madhyamikas, there is no such thing. Rather, it is a self is something that is merely designated on the basis of the aggregates. For the essentialists, they say if something is merely designated, then how could it function? How could it do anything? But yet, it's only when we see the functioning of our various aggregates, our form and our consciousness and so forth, that we can designate, oh, I'm doing this, or I'm thinking this. It's only on that kind of basis, something being designated on that, that we can speak of its functionality. There's no way for these things to function if they had that kind of objective existence in their own right. But for essentialists, they would say that there's got to be something that we can find, that we can point to, that can withstand analysis. If things exist, we should be able to like point to it and actually say, this is that thing, rather than say when we designate on the basis of the aggregates, like this is Tashi, or this is Tundrup, this is John, and we should be able to, according to the essentialists, if we're going to say that that's John, for example, we should be able to find them, point to that person. If we can't find that thing and point to it and identify it, well, then they wouldn't exist at all. For them, for something to be merely designatedly existent is not sufficient. That's not able to function or do the kind of work. So, however, the Prasangikas, Madhyamikas, assert that although one searches in this way, one does not find it. Therefore, they say that the appearance of a phenomena existing from its own side is a mistaken appearance. So here again, for the Prasangikas, they would say that this merely designated existence suffices. There's not something that we can point to and find that is that self, but yet we can say, like, when our aggregates or our form is sick, we say, I'm sick. If it were the case that there were some kind of a self that, say, existed inside of the aggregates but weren't them, then we couldn't say things like, I'm sick, when our form wasn't feeling well and so forth.
Oh yeah. Tanda daame basa tongbanyi sede sungura. O daame bam tongbanyi sede. I kansa kangal she kwaya she yomar sida. Modu lada mi koban tum gedu china. Nesong Majibshi, Kiwa Chimati, Ladami, Kiwa Sambuchi Topuyana, Tongba Nidan, Tameta, the Shake where your mother. You don't go Kansa, Sanjum de Gamgashilia, Ayore Songuyore. Kashel Tayo Mare, Rawa to Betayo Marisana, Koshedo, and Jigdo, Takage Medu something. Kendo maybe can never young yore. It is a co Tayore, say, Nalola. Nangachibe Tayores, Chirubasa, Nashi Suda, Yebes and the Sungare, Kashelia, Kaima Sungaja Sugar, Yores and Amadi, Medicine, Madina, you take your mother. Mason any cheddar loan to a cake. Yes, and now you're some like what you were wrong. I should use something young and I should children, Yagayora. What you do? Till Tara Mamboyore, Araja Cotton, Kaya Ron, Jesus, Kona, David Mato. You remember Mamboyora. Takwa Chibusi, Covenal, Takwa Chibu, Kuranja Suji, Robert Yumare, Chame Sigra, Chachi Yomarco, Nazu, so what is Chamabudoa, Chachi Cambodia, Chasha Mabuchedoa. Takwa Chibu Chame Sigra, Chachi Chigio Marco, Janja Madako, Robert Yomare, Takwa Chibu Raons, Tindeta Yores, what in this Yomare, Chirubasa Nashi. Takwachibu the knowledge of energy, then your marriage and Edgar. Yes, Pumbus, Ruda, so would I send the passion, pay loga, touch you, Pumbule, tension better. Pay till a pekaga, Mumbo Seven Nashi, so would the pasha, same pasha, swap passion, and touch you, come to the pekaga yange, and they your marriage on Edgar, Pumbule, tension better, your matas, in this way, Yora. Young Pumbo Swala Madebas, I said the worst way your mother snapping you. Pumbunga down with the Yana so good as Yana simply swore which is some down and ask some good mother. There's a sound Madame Chigal and ask some dance she Ravio Mara. Rani so much, she is Swala. The Megaba Sway, the your mother sweat. Taramambuchi Yora. Oh, teacher. Oh, yeah, what did you learn the mountains?
So here, what we are talking about is in reference to selflessness and emptiness. And again, the kind of teachings that the Buddha gave, in order to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, one doesn't need to come to an understanding of selflessness or emptiness. And the Buddha taught in ways that really meet the various dispositions of disciples. And so some, if you were to teach them selflessness from the beginning, they would be afraid. That would induce terror, and they wouldn't properly understand that. So there are times when the Buddha talked about there being a self that sounds very similar to the kind of self posited by non-Buddhists. And there are times when the Buddha, say if someone asked if there was a self, he remained silent, not answering that question, because there would be problematic consequences in either way. If the Buddha were to affirm that or were to say, oh, there is no self, there's the danger of that person falling into a kind of nihilistic extreme. And if you say that, oh, yes, there is a self, there's kind of a danger of them latching onto that and feeling more pride and sort of being obsessed with that self. And so here, when it comes to the Buddha's teachings, there are many levels of subtlety. If we think that there is some kind of a self that is like right in the center of us somehow, something that is permanent and that is partless and that is autonomous, as if it didn't depend upon anything else. It didn't have any sort of parts that we could point out. This is the kind of self that is negated in some of the teachings of the Buddha, where he's talking about how could there possibly be something that is completely partless and sort of autonomous and a singular kind of a thing. And so there are times when the Buddha speaks of there being such a self, but also refutes that there is such a self. And there are times when the Buddha's teachings are talking about refuting a self that is kind of something that is totally separate apart from the aggregates, that is seen as sort of independent of them. So there are various levels of subtlety to the Buddha's teachings in terms of refuting a self and dealing with our ideas of self. So this is something that we should be aware of.
Oh, yeah, devotion. Oh, that Sheila, the Diane Zashiles.
Yeah.
Uma tenjo many besuna to now or did this one. Nyugutabu, Jawa Rangwine Yonase, Nyugutabu, Ra, Jawa de Rangwine Yatsu, Jawa Shiova Yanase, Nyuguyaki on the Shingagon, Tendor, the Yangobuya, Tangudwa, the Rangwine Korangaran Fatadi, Korakoratine, Toyan Besorach, Tongudwa, Korayatineto. And when they Seneco, Sachu, Melon, Joa, Nieleto to Chetezu, Kenji Koramabaya, Kichugo, Mato Koratine, Toyong, Yomaro. Rangwine Geshe Yomare. Tenji Debarjo Shandagi, Judan Kesosan ko Luburtuya, Tayongora. The Korangwine to Yoyajika Yomaro. Yukudabu Jawa Rangwine Yonas, Kachi Mambu to the Mambu Korangwine Yoda Sertine Koraya Tayongo, Rangwinea, Rangango, Yatayongo. Garazo Dabudi to Sashilese. Go Rangwine Yona, and Digmaris Rangwine Yona. Nick Abandos, Kadeskidos, Station it, oh, did this game with the search. Then near Yokoresura, Tashile. Ale my shell, Manile, my commitment, Wobakanda, Joanna, Yumai. Or Tadil took them out to shed them Mambu or no. Taji said Chiruba said, Judan Drebut, Anichibuch, Chiso, said, you are the Tatus. Judan Drebut, Anichibuch, any haki of Grace. Umabata. Well, Lucian, Judan Drebu Tanichibo Yomar, Pekavayo, Judan Drebunide, Judipe, say Logashi, Drebu de Logayura, and a meta to Hataburu Kavatua. Sabian and Yugudo Pekavaki Udua, Judan Drebu, Tanichibo Yomar. That Drebu, Taji Kelling, get this Kiruba, Tangzemba said, Alemai. Rangwine years and could say any condition do Chajutangura, oh, that and rest you give you said. Maria Ranguni to be Kushe, my Koran Shanche, Ungurasera. In the to them out to see Madayongora, Ranguni to be Kalam, but it is Segiora, Shida and the Kavando Tagiora. Taki your mothers. Shanlek was the Ranguni to be Kushan and Debushan Giot. Ranguni to be Kushan and Debushan Giot. Penangazo Ranguni to be Kushan and Debushan Giora. You could have Ramadu to what you said, Jebudi Ramadu to what you said, and the Akash, Ramona to be Kushalit and Debushanki was. Kushalit and the Debushanki was some Sigil Mare. And Dilian Mabu with Doctor. Kushalit and the Debushanki was some Sigil Mare, the Shalaman said. Ramona to be Kushalit and the Debushanki was the Yomare said. Alemay Shalaman said. Nile mai cumi tasha nigale kewa kelenge te ye mares tu me balete ne ke changbin ba se ge chora ye ma jaga tu te mal ye tangbu de jambul de ya ke de tu ge yo mares se ge to samle tang yo ra ka de syong ge na sam ge ora nam ga tong ba se ke lia ane sa to do ri si chora ka de chora se nam ga tong ba de ko ju yo mar ko ra ra se chora Tal Juchegan Drake, O Mare. Uranshi, you may well then show it some good. To your mother, sir, Uranshi, to your near details, details, the cockard. Tambujum said it's called some good. Too many cures. They couldn't some Mambuta Yore. Yoashima, Mangama, your mother, Talas, Mitsu, make got able to this. She says, so sharp matter. And your mother said, and that Rumbudes. Sendi Yamuji Soyatandal Pesegore. Passing as this, the hippie says you do provide in a hippie city. You change and see my repet. Now can't as a content, I could now it was a case do. What in this of the Segore? Messicata and Kelwood. It's Chima son of Samlamada, Chima Samladangama Samlamada. Can't keep this, you carry 10 at this. Can't card the security mother, Shandak is some town Marciore. Kurandi, oh, Tati, Mabusa, Tandiker, Alame Salam Yilma, Mime, Jumebalet and Yawaseti, or Tirita, Jumebalet and Tiris. Mabuchi, Tansan, Yudo. We are second to do Tambuchi shower, Tital, Jude, Homa Residua. And Zambulin did the machine, Tambutan, Nambutombuchi Chara. That is Tambu condition, the Sene. Number Seneco to train your day. Number Tomba to Tamu. Kozu lego ange tsuru rusu chi church and this some girl mother. Ital kage mego toto chi young for a young mare. Kashiyan, Tambu Chuchi Yoris, Tia came to the any some much orders. The Shekwa. A tilly chew your vessel, tilly chew your mother, sir. Such a said, people in a she said, chew your mother in a pseudo. They said, number too many, too many see you win any, but in a young shoulder, and I'm the cargo young shoulder. Bunga said to me, she to the Mingu Bacha, and cook a little son, to turn as you are. That individual. To me means, Alimation, you make me. Wobukanda Kana, Joa Namia, your minus, Wobukandichina. Wobukanda Kana, Joa Namia, your minus. Wobukandichina, Joa de Rangoni Druba Yoma. Rawan the Kora to turn as you are. To Jimang was sauce on the matter and the Kochumashira. To Jingo and the Kochuchera. Alexander Pashangara to us. Tarjo de Shing to the Hagba Jagdor, got the Rapadashana. How could sing the Yugus, Tarjo the Yugus, Koran when the Yovas and the Sorgadongas? Okay, your mother, Hagba Jan, Komayo, Jujin, she does your do your mother, Yohashi, Chamara, Korangone. Korangone, your Gemaro, your Yora. Korangone, your Karesan, Tension Devolution, your day. Koyang Bure, and it loom jagger, and this other Koyosoda. Chara to which in Yako Yumarwa. Oh, Tibase. What is your lamna? The more dresses.
So here, then, continuing in the text, it says, if production of something such as a sprout were to exist from its own side, production from one of the four alternatives would be found, but it is not. So accordingly, Nagarjuna says in the first verse of Fundamental Verses on the Middle Way, in no sense is anything ever produced, whether from itself, from other, from both, or without a cause. So here, like, for example, when a sprout pops up, there's this green thing that's coming out of the ground, and it seems to us like, oh, that exists in itself, in its own right. There, that sprout came up due to its own power. But really, when we examine, we can see that this is something that only comes about due to an aggregation of causes and conditions. There has to be a sort of substantial cause and all of the coordinating conditions for a sprout to come about. It doesn't just do so in and of itself or by itself. Now, when we look at the four sort of alternatives of production, many philosophical schools land on one of these types of production. Like, for example, the first of these, that things being produced from itself. So due to their sort of philosophical thinking, they come to an understanding that things arise in and of themselves. It seems like they are produced from themselves. They seem to be sort of arising from their own power, and thereby schools like the Samkhyas, for example, assert that there is a sort of principal element that acts as the cause of all various effects, and this is predicated on cause and effect being of the same nature. Now, this is not something that we can accept, that the cause and effect here are asserted to have different natures. They aren't of the same entity or of the same nature. And so it's, although phenomena appear to be sort of set up by themselves, objectively existent in that way, when we really examine the way that they are produced, we can eliminate their being produced from themselves. Now, It is, there are those that would assert that production from another. Now, here, when we refer to this second alternative of production from another, it isn't just a mere other, but it's in the sense of something that is inherently existent, a cause that is inherently existent, giving rise to a result that is inherently other. And so, this, something that is existent from its own side, a cause existent from its own side, can't give rise to a result that exists from its own side. It's not just merely another production from a mere other that is being refuted there. And then we have the refutation of production from both itself and another, and without a cause. So here, there are philosophical schools think through these various things in order to land on a particular point. Like, for example, the Charvakas, who would say that there is no cause, that things arise causelessly. For them, like, for example, the way that we have sort of empty space and then the world comes about, they would say you can't actually point to a cause of that. It's just kind of random. There isn't any sort of original cause, and we can't point to a kind of causality. And this leads them then to sort of an attitude of like, well, there's no past and future lives, so let's just enjoy ourselves. Let's just do what we want. It's sort of like a hippie mentality, one could say, of like, well, nothing really matters. I'm just going to enjoy myself. I don't need to think about the future. I don't need to worry about that. And I'll just enjoy, do whatever makes me happy. So here, when it comes to looking at causality and trying to find, like, for example, posit an original cause of the world, this is something that is quite difficult to do. Even when we look at like scientists and their sort of theories, well, backing up. So if we have like an empty kind of a space, Buddhists would assert that there has to be the sort of potential materiality already there that say leads to the Big Bang. And when you try to trace back, well, like for scientists, they might say the original cause of this universe was the Big Bang. Well, what came before that? What led to that? So here, trying to point to an original cause can be problematic. But when we're talking about production from the four extremes, these are eliminated in that it's only due to a various aggregation of causes and conditions. Whatever it is can only come about sort of due to a various coming together of these causes and conditions. Like, for example, when we see the branch of a tree waving in the wind, we might think like it almost looks like that branch is just waving by itself. It's doing that on its own. But really, it's only because of these various causes and conditions, like the weight of the tree being light enough to be carried by the wind. If it were something metal, it wouldn't be doing that, and so forth. And so the way that things appears to us is as though they were sort of caused by themselves, doing it by themselves. But in actuality, when we investigate and analyze, we can see that that's not really the case.
Oh yeah. Uma jukba le jang se do. Singda raya la le shendu means singda dabu se do. Yema ne singda se do ka ji kolore ko si yamado. Ta te sa ne namdu ta modra ta computer ta mambu to wa chala be chuje mambu shane. O te ju tan to se chane ya ora chi ora. Singda raya la le shendu me. Singda se de ko tene ta wa sam mambu je cho ne ti Kanga Damada Sosu Laga Chet, Tomne, Shinda Drugudos, Shinda Chala Orkitu, Min Drugudos, Serva, Namdu Drugudos, and Namdudan Chala Orkitu, Min Drugudos, Pirsose, Takurua, Neko Pergate Namdu Ramachi, Yomarwa. Chala Tonda Mambuyora, Tidashi, Tanging Miora, oh, Tidico. Shinda Rangela, Rangune Yomar, Rangune Yona. And the Yala Tonda Mambuyora, Shinda is the Coloda, Nalo, Tessadachi, Mambuyora, or Tezo Gires, Shinda Raela, Shendim, Rangi Yala, Colola, Soba Tezule, Ramawe Shenji, Yomareso, Shendo Yomare. Yala to Sukaya, my Gets Logachi, Gumarwa, Namdu, Namduna, Chalakaja, Yeshi, Namduti, Rangune Yona, Kabayora, Segiora. Rangune Yona, Yala to the Kaya is Pel Logachi or Vesnete Marva. In the Rail Shendime. Shemi Maise, Shem Mayimba the eyes, is already Rangune to be Shinda, in a Namdu in a day or so to Gumarwa. And they are mentions then by my Asura. Then by Sidutatelia without Sobotella, danger of my desore. Yana danger yona, Yana Mochibush and danger your town, Pekagash and danger your essay. Ejilia Motat and Dembare, Sarah. Ejilia Mr. Shilia Kambayore, Kambatan Dembare, Motat and Dembare, Sarah, the danger you are it. Yana Ejilia, Ejil and Gotan Dembare, Sarah. Mo Chikbakura, Chasher of Chichen Dembare. In the decision you are Maresora. Semi Mayet and Day Ambeshi. The Yala Lame Yala Tanderme. Yashinde Yala Dozo, Tensa de Che, Shinde Kora Rawan to Trubache Telepa Tenche. In this you are Maresora. Yamane Casura, Shinde de Tensa of Che, Yala to the Pa, Rawan to get and Day you are Maresora. Duba Chamis. Yala Chokba de Shinda Maresora. If the Sobda de Shinda Maresora. O this end on the Ragumardo, round to Trubachiona, in the Chani Yokura. And I do Diva. Tawashira Kwasu Tashi Sunguiva. Me Pumbulation, Telapumi, Terdemet, Shishiba Pundemes, Tanga Sungudwa. Sanjay in under Simja in under Kavanelu Tatul Chibare. Sanjay in under Garazu Tadisera. Pumbuse, Soso, Rawa to Trubachiana. Rama Pumbu Regine Taribete Maro. Pumise. Pumbule Shamba Pe Kavash and the Tachi or Teo Maro. Tela Pumise. Ah, the Rama Chiche, Tela Pumbu de Tenshenten, Josegal Chala Shabana to stand at Teo Mara. Pumi Pumbule, Tela Pume. Tell them, Yana, ah, the Tensa de Che Rama Che, Tela Pumbu to Tenshen to Tenche, Josegal. Pova Shabana, she said, this they were Teo Marisera. Pume Pumbulation telephone. The Shishiba Punde Mesedo. The Shishiba Pumbuliatene, Dembetsuge Marisera. Dembetsugiona, Yana Shina Nalia, Tayore, Siore, Seraph, Tinashi. The Kagachan or Kagachan Dembayogura. Yana Kwe Chashed of Chilia, Chiyogura. What in the Kayo Mercer, Pumi Pumbulation telephone. Ishiba Pudemis. Ishiba Kanshi, that's Androna, Sanjete Raguma Resevora. Ramado Tubachiona, sending here Yogura. O de Tanga Sodoa. And woman Juba Capso. Yipta, Sopas, Ni, Tamares, Tatin, and there's a Tangarwa. Sashikasu, Bulu Tangaso. Woman Juba Capsigan, Nita. In the Raila Shendime Shemi, my intended Mayala Mayala Tadabetici, but do what some miss, if miss. So what there is the Resayoma. If the subject to a tea, so dear Regoma. Tatu Sura. You are teaching Lamna.
So then it continues saying, therefore, sprouts and so forth have no production that is ultimately established or established from its own side. Or if it did, it would have to be of one of those four types. So then similarly, Chandrakirti's entering the middle way states, a chariot is neither asserted to be other than its parts, nor to be non-other. It does not possess them. It does not depend on the parts, and the parts do not depend on it. Neither is it the mere collection of the parts, nor is it their shape. Searching for the self is like this. So here in Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, he uses the example of a chariot. Now we could use any number of different kinds of machines of today. We can talk about like a car or a plane or a computer, whatever it is. If we have like something like a plane, there is this collection of parts on the basis of which we designate, oh, that's a plane, and that plane is carrying people. It's carrying those various things. It's flying over there. But when you try to find, well, what is that plane from among all of those thousands thousands of parts, there's not something that we can point to and say, well, this is the plane. So here, it's not as though a chariot, for example, or a plane or whatever we want to examine is asserted to be other than its parts. We can't talk about that thing other than being designated on a particular collection of parts. So there can't be something that is other than that. We have to look at the various sort of parts, and it can't be not other nor non-other in the sense that it isn't just its parts. It isn't the exact thing that it is being designated on. Nor is there a relationship of kind of possession. In the sense of possession, we could have two different types of possession, like in the sense of like Devadatta owning a house or a car, where the possession is something that is sort of a different nature. Or we could speak of possession in the sense of like being a part of something, like, oh, Devadatta has a head and that is part of his body. The kind of relationship between the thing designated and its basis of designation is not like this. There is neither a sort of inherent kind of possession nor non-inherent sort of possession, but rather it's this again, relationship of designation. And nor is it the case that a chariot, say, depends on the parts. Like the parts are here and the chariot is something that's sort of like set on top of them, the way we could put a cup on a table or something like that. Nor is it the opposite way of the sort of the thing that is designated, the chariot being the support or the place of dependence for those parts sort of existing on top of it. Neither of those works for something that, again, appears to us to have this kind of autonomous existence. And this is the case whether it is a chariot or any other thing. Now here, the last, the sixth and seventh types of analysis refer to it not being the mere collection of the parts, nor is it their shape, the sort of arrangement of those parts. Now, Nagarjuna has stated that in reference to the Tathagata, but in this verse, we can think about it as a Buddha or a sentient being, whatever it may be, that the Tathagata is not their aggregates, nor other than their aggregates. They don't possess the aggregates, nor do they depend on the aggregates, nor does the aggregates depend upon them. Well, what other than that, though, could be the Tathagata? So here, this is like this kind of examination that was here in the verse by Chandrakirti. But if we take there are these five, again, sort of five different modes of analysis of the thing designated being its basis of designation, being other than its basis of designation, possessing that, being dependent on it, or that being dependent upon it. So none of those kinds of relationships can explain the sort of relationship between, like, for example, a Tathagata and the aggregates. And now here, whether we take the Tathagata or an ordinary being, a chariot, whatever it may be, those five different modes of analysis are what Nagarjuna presents, and Chandrakirti adds on to that it is not just the mere collection of those parts, nor is it their shape.
Oh yeah. Shingda ta tundu tsebe menyi ba tar ta jang ta tundu tsebe menyi ba yinbe. Shingda tar ta jang tundan ba mebar song shin se. Ta tundu tanda lapsa tina ne kansa le su shabe na. Pumbugan tsokba de rangwene trube tama re se ora. Ene pumbu yipde, sokbu yipde tama re se ne nga re dhura. Ta le ya ta tundu, shingda le ta tundu. Shingda ta tundu kora sebu dowa. Shingda rangela le shendu shemi ma yitende yame yala le yala de dupa tsambe yip me se dowa. Ta kansa le su chane ni teba karcha ora se ne. Pumbugan tsokba de dupa tsambe ma yishe. Sokbu yipde tama re se, de chachura. Teshindu renje trawa leja, ta chikwa rachire ma lon bhe. Renje trawa leja, ngombo lutu ki oma renje trawa leja rwa. Kibu sa me chuma is, kibu siyo kansa le rwa. Ta tawdun tsegi orda, tiong taba truba yina. Ani tina ne pa tawsu che su chikwa re, kagire se re re, teni nye yogu re sungo ra. Ta sokbu le ya tawche che re. Kibu de, mi tabu de, tiong taba rangwa ne truba chiyo bhe yina. Kibu su tabu tina ne. 다인 버치 니 말에서 이부 사면에서도 사실도 소부 르발라 소부 사실 차고 차들에서 거라 다음에 주면에서도 차다 추실라 소부 대조 말에 소부 차세 매매에서 저기 차 소부 차부치 대서 저기 차대 롱매에서 우파서 땅에다 부가 우든데 땅에 여러 어디서 롱도서 말에 롱 쪽으로 와 롱매 남과 매스도 부가 남과서 동산된데 거라 나구나네 동바치 우야한테 우도 파다고도 거기 나로 동바매나니 되고 말와 가서 이제서 갈라서 되었다 그래서 그 말에서 다 말에서 롱매 매매 롱매 남과서도 부가 남과 동산돼서 거라 우땅에다 남시에 남버시바데 다마에서 아테나시 소아 말에 두시 말에 그래서 바자 주러와 공주 말에 나게 말에 차도 말에 레게 와체바데 말에 레레레 젠다 무신달 차나 단다디 저불이 차네 셔도 남시 마에 꾸메나 대신도 풍불하마 꾸 다래요 말이지 텔레셴나 기부가 풍붕알레 셴도 에 다대응보 세분나시 따발라나시야 로가 로스 따지요 어르베인데 요 말 와서 거라 시 기부 랑게 dakshi susodas dakshi de chershi de se chare gora ngazu miri tosuna o drashire dure sharman chi slabe ne mich tongura ta mutoya shora sobore tone o tichire dichire tare palare motare mina tire slabura tambu toya tele dakshi sigora goda ki humure chi tosuna ti kambe dakshiro o pi kambashi doasa 싱글이 야가도 비게 싱지도 와삼사 dak시세 남과 똥발이야 이 메토데 강바데 텐데 따야요 말와 담보지 셈을 차례 시치고라 와들 dak시세 거라 dak시 풍붕하서라 강살에는 dak시 풍붕하여라 이내시 강바리전이 dak시 마부도 와도다 찍바다 사바다 짜다 내가 가져가지 얼마부여라 시 기부랑게 dak시 소소다 남시 라소바다 에달레 셴 초안도 신도실서바 셴다 간에 잠메니베 기부 던담바 메바 소소세 기부 던담버려 말에 랑운에 요 말에 랑신기 요 말에 동반이래 세데 어디 던담버 그나 랑운에 요나 어째는 이에요 그랬더니 그 간에 많이나 랑운에 미도 삼사데 공부하다 즉 어디 봐도 질라나
So here, just as one cannot find a chariot by searching in these 7 ways, one cannot find the self by searching in these 7 ways. So like those 7 that were given there, the self is not asserted to be other than the aggregates, nor is it none other than the aggregates. It doesn't possess them or depend on them, nor do the aggregates depend on the self. And then when we apply here those last 2, nor is the self the mere sort of collection of those aggregates, nor is it the arrangement or the shape of the aggregates. And so therefore, Chandrakirti indicates that like the chariot, the self does not ultimately exist. If it were ultimately existent, it would have to be something that could bear scrutiny, could bear analysis, that you could actually find something and be able to point to as being that thing. And so similarly here then, Nagarjuna states in The Precious Garland that the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, and not all of them. Yet what person is there apart from these? So again, when we're trying to search for the person within the basis of designation, we can look at like, is the person the sort of solidity of the body, those hard parts like our bones and so forth? No. And is the person the kind of watery parts like the blood and marrow and so forth? Or is the person the kind of inner heat that they have? Or is the person the sort of wind, their breath, those various, the sort of motility or movement within the body? Or is the person the kind of empty space? We have to have hollow space to be able to take in breath and so forth. And is the person the consciousness? None of these can we point to and say that is the person, yet there's no person apart from that. So we can't look at any of the aggregates, like the aggregate of consciousness, for example, and say that is the person. The person isn't that, say, moment of anger or the thought that they've had, or they're not their karmic formations. It's not as though the person is the virtue that they did. But what could the person be apart from that collection of aggregates? There's nothing that we can point to and say there is the person. So it's not like the person, like the aggregates are here and the person is over there, like blue and yellow, or like an ox and a cow, but rather it's only on the basis of designation that we designate a person. So as Nagarjuna states, since one cannot find the person within its basis of imputation, form, consciousness, and so forth, somewhere other than that, the person does not ultimately exist. And so here, when we have this process of designation, initially there is something that appears to us that we then designate on the basis of. So there has to be something that appears to us first, and then we say, oh, that is like, we see walls and windows and so forth, and we think, oh, that's a house. But if we were to then search within all of the various components, within the wood and the nails and the glass and all of that, we can't find something that says that is the house. But there's nothing, there's no way to designate that other than having the appearance of that basis of designation. Now, if there were something that existed in the way that it appears, that would have to be ultimately existent from its own side, objectively existent in its own right.
Oh yeah. Sure can she you na rangwine ye ko ba shira. Rangwine men me go ba de. Ani de ngwe ma la so ba te zu lu de se wona. Me go ba ne ngwe bo yo ba ma wa nam de lu yin je se. Ngwe bo yo ba ma se ngwe bo to da ba ye rangwine ye te ba ye se de. Mara zo rangwine yo ba to na shi de ba re se yo de se. O te zu lu de se ngora. Uma be lu ma re sta Italia ke ba ka chi shi ju me da ro sa ro ba. Yo na rangwine yo ko de uma be lu la. Rangwine me na me ba re se she ro o de uma be lu ma de. Ngwe bo tin ru ma to ju lu re se. Uma be lu le yo na rangwine yo ko ma re rangwine me na me ku ma re se. O ti ka ba re se so go ra. Uma tenjo lu la ke dar ka le se. Uma tenjo lu le te ma re se. Yo na rangwine yo ko ma re. Rangwine me na me ku ma re rangwine me. Tene ta ba sam do yo se. Ro. Dakshi chashe ko ra mai ge chashe ru chil te. Ene so so le pa ta sha ko ra. Lo le won chen bu yo le pa ta nye se de ji de ta nye se de. Lo da tra ni bu de pa chi ta sha ra ming ta sha ra. Kon du ra se na pa jo me de so so tu ja she bu je. So so le pa ta yo ra ko rangwine ko do yi me wa chi ni mi ka ge yi tu me wa thong go ra. Yi thong go ma ra. 소소요 거치 제시해다 만디네 따담 지 만디네 그것도 시부지도 상으로 유지보네 뭐도 그 랑은에 짱짱마로 소소로 파다요라 이면은 미강게 고통도 배도 자시부지도 상게 상금도 이동하리나 어야 시부지도 상 미치기 통한테 강게 이동한 통구마로 미치기 이동한 통에나 뒤뒤도 넘버 탐제도 이동한 통구메도 Samlutan lo tana yidu atunguri amada bakasu kemendo mada bakasu tona ko chidam me batunguri mato yidu wada ma o tendege tungu mato so loli pa ta tanye yo wan ki shakbas dan le ko adios o yo ko ban de ngwa ma lo re mato tenje lo ma resya ta kebe shizu menda yongo ora range pumbu tonala tenes so thank you local yes pena thank you lola leji tabu range pumbu thon la tenes de leji shi trado fa ta ro ta ba sam je ane de do nyawa bu leji yuzu zo ba re se o leji na de do leji do do te sha se ta leji si ming de wa nyama cha ga ming ta su de do wa hala so atam ne chung ba to me de leji se ra che ge chi ba de ta ne ya 우저래 되잖니 주진세로 되는 명다스도 와 되게 내신 버서 해지 유저 저바에 벨해지 또왜 딱바 참지 자와 친내서 여버 줘라세 대삼게 레진 샤고래네 레진 소보다 샘다 콘도 뜻에 가르치나 레진 콘도 세셔 레진 이부도 레진 대부분도 레진 두고도 레진 대샤 라버지 마셔서 레진 마셔서 레진 소부 대부분도 레진 나고도 세로 가고 샤고라 마도 레진 도도 지유네 티 풍분나디 소분나디 레진 하고요 말아 그 때에 딱 봐서 밑에서 각을 뜻이들 레진세 샤고요라 때에 딱 봐서 세 땡진대버리 좋아세 망보지 소바 딱시칠 때네 되게 봐지 다 대점을 거셔 그래서 차셔도 내가 지리 레진 자와지 보셔 자와지 동게 동해용게 대화용게 간거 샤고 그래시거라 라문에 매번은 동해용게 매번도 인지께고 말했어요 근데 자두요라 자와도 쇼도요라 동해용게 내시면은 인지 전부시에 기도다가서 주낭수로 샤도라 이제 저번에 해지 또배 따sam게 자와 지내서요 반조라스 뭐마 남게네 대sam게 유주 저거 많이 버렸어 때네 딱 봤sam게 해지 바르다 해지 코라이다 일로시 유진원에 요래 섬겨라 그다 해지시 딱배 해지디 가이 째wen디 인시 랑군에 해지 니주요 바시 그래서라 예대 대달제나 해지 많이나 해지 랑군에 매바 이베스 대단한 해지 때네 매고바에 송어부 된루마 저거 때려 뭐부 랑군에 지라에 매는 매를 때네 매버래 저보라다 남게 매도 되지 버렸어요 뭐 대교하다나 대다르마 형마마 남네 딱제게 타니 마을에 만데요 뭐마도 딱보다 쳬베 타카루 마을에 만데레세 딱 봐서도 야는 랑군에 여시그라 정답을 여래서도 딱달로 놓으래 야는 랑군에 매 요마를 민도 시슬람네 체달로 놓으래 여바데 매바전에 체바로 체달에 랑군에 매바데 여바를 따와들 딱딱시그라 우마바다나 대달마 뭐뭐 남네 딱제게다 뭐뭐 야는 딱달로 놓으래 야는 체달로 놓으래 마도 கொஞ்சம் 남샤 가르쳐나 만지버려서라 야나 여버데 매버서셔라 야나 매버지 여버서셔라 오늘에는 뭐분에서 코랑 가리는 때나시 샤토스고라 우마바데코 탄이다 때에 은조신게 되세요라 가루마레 마데버송 데세 아사랑운에 여바다나 아사랑운에 여바다나 딱다르로 대주어신에 랑운에 여바다나 딱베 탈을 흉도로 가사 딱뭐 랑운에 여바다나 딱베 탈을 흉도래 산도로 랑운에 매베 자와 진이기 가사자 요 말에서 따위네 체달 흉도래 여바데 매베서셔 탈 흉도라 시송소 어디버도 진도샤냐
So, here in the system of the essentialists, if a phenomena exists, it must exist from its own side. For if this phenomena did not exist from its own side, it would not exist at all. So, here for the essentialist schools, they say that for something to exist, it needs to have that kind of objective or inherent existence from its own side. That is necessary in order to be able to posit its existence. Whereas for the Prasangika Madhyamikas, this is not true in their system. So, for example, in the Prasangika Madhyamaka system, by merely imputing with terms and concepts, this is Devadatta, independence upon seeing Devadatta's aggregates. The mode of existence of Devadatta, the person who experiences happiness and suffering, is encompassed. So, here, when it comes to the way that we have something that is the basis of designation, and we use our various worldly conventions to designate on things. And so when we designate, for example, something appears to us and we designate that as being unpleasant, and we use that kind of designation in order to get angry. If it were the case that said person were to really objectively exist as unpleasant, as an enemy, as something that were bad, then it would have to be the case case that every person, everything that encounters them would have to see them in that same way. And we know that that is not the case. Rather, it is merely the case that we are positing by force of our conceptual designations. So when we talk about like this is Devadatta, we are merely imputing with terms, with words, and with our thoughts or concepts. This is Devadatta, independent upon seeing, in this case, Devadatta's aggregate. And here we can, Devadatta is just a name, an old Indian name like Dharmadatta as well is one that, and datta has the sense of giving. So one who makes offerings to the gods or one who makes offerings to the Dharma, this is where that name is coming from. And we just go back to the Sanskrit. So anyway, Devadatta, when we see like the body of Devadatta, we can think, oh, there is Devadatta. And when we're not really thinking about that or investigating any further, we can speak of, oh, look, he's going over there. Oh, Devadatta is sitting down. Oh, Devadatta is sick. Oh, Devadatta is hurt, and so forth. Oh, he's angry. And when we are speaking in this way, it is something that is merely designating. There's a collection of parts, and we are designating on that collection, oh, this is Devadatta, and oh, this is he's he's injured or he's sick or whatever it may be. And this is this comprises his existence. So as it says, by merely imputing with the terms and concepts, this is Devadatta, independence upon seeing Devadatta's aggregates, the mode of existence of Devadatta, this person who experiences happiness and suffering, is encompassed. He is merely designated, and that kind of merely designated thing is it suffices for being existent. Now, so in this case, for example, when it comes to if something were existent from its own side, again, objectively existent, we might ask, well, why would we even have compassion for that? If something is existent from its own side and there's no possibility of any sort of change or a development of that, there would be no reason to even feel compassion for that. So, but in the Madhyamaka system, they posit that Devadatta has the ability to perform functions by being merely imputed by conception. And so from the perspective of essentialists, being merely imputed by conception does not encompass the mode of existence. They assert that by searching for that which is Devadatta, when you make the imputation, this is Devadatta, you would need to be able to find something. Like you need to find Devadatta to exist from his own side so that you can identify this is him. And if on investigation you do not find Devadatta, then Devadatta would not exist from his own side, and therefore he would have to be completely and utterly non-existent. And so here, this really, these essentialists are mistaken with regard to the things that exist and things that don't exist. That which actually exists, these mere designations, they assert as utterly non-existent, and this kind of inherent existence or existence from its own side, something that is being negated by Prasangika Madhyamakas, is something that they're upholding. So it's sort of like they're reversed, or they're in the wrong way with regard to what it is that exists and what does not exist. So from the perspective of a Prasangika Madhyamaka, essentialists who make such an assertion do not avoid asserting one of the two extremes, permanence or annihilation. When they assert that persons and so forth exist from their own side, they fall into that extreme of permanence. So they're holding things that, they say that for things to exist, they have to exist from their own side. They have to have that objective existence. And thereby they're falling into this extreme of permanence. And when they assert that persons capable of performing functions do not exist because they do not exist from their own side, they fall into the extreme of annihilation. So they're unable to posit correctly functioning things existing if they are not existent from their own side.
Oh yeah. Long the chamber. Tarian, Tadai by Lovian Dawata, she kept in Jabales. Over Yavar Mave Tarnase. The sitting over the Yavani in Batisito, ranking over Yavanilas. Yes, and the Rangune Yoko Sigura Conde. And the Rangune Mena Mavre Sigura. Tanget ranking over the Travatese. Telling over the number Tamjeto Mabese, Rangune Mena, ranking over to Bamana, number times a memory. Drepung Ratandra, Pumbu Ratandra, Pumbul Raji Omaro, Titandra, this. Pumbu Ratandra, Tanya Soma, the Mandebesir. Rangwine, you see, Rangwiman, memory, security. It's a Sheza Kaviana, Tatal Londuriana, Cheddar Londuris, or never see you ever Lamdura in Tatara. You are the member Resalam, Cheddar Londura. Di ngombar deba tamje drikonjer di ngombar deba tamje ngobo mawage deba tamje de ani ngobe nezu da tumba drikaware se tumba mare she sombataro so tichloshana.
So here, then the Master Chandrakirti states in his commentary to the 400 stanzas, so providing a kind of a source for this, essentialists say that whenever things exist, they have an essence. So as they see it, without essence, these things would be completely non-existent, like the horn of a donkey. So for them, if there is no kind of objective existence, inherent existence, existence from their own side, then things would fall into being utterly non-existent, like things like a rabbit's horn or a sky flower, things that are utterly non-existent. Therefore, these essentialists cannot avoid being proponents of both the extremes of permanence and annihilation. So at the same time where they are asserting that for things to exist, they must exist objectively, that also means that they are unable to understand how things could exist as mere designations and therefore fall into that extreme of an annihilation as well. And so consequently, it is difficult to reconcile all of their explicit assertions.
Oh yeah, that shunam yusu la cheba sedra. That don't do the tal shesar yang jati she to tibarshira ye. Yusu la cheba sedra. Ko chu yebade tene tabasam to yore sura. Teje debar chu to yore. Rangune yo mare se. Rangune mena chu de yore se. Chawa chenge chu yeba shagore se. O tinde sungu yora shege yora longjan che shege yora. Oh, Tautu Chena, Meba Rangshiki Mebetore. Rangwine Yona, di Kawares, Yandi, Umbares, di Lechin Res, Tagbatunde, Rangwine Yona, Akagres, Chena, Raesh Yogora. Tautu Chena, Meba Rangshiki Chena, and Tautu Chena. Ragu Mariti, Mebate, Rangshiki Mebetore, Matu Mebete Maresta, Talia Shesa, Dima Josoloshan. Sashida, Jubala Sobe Kapsuse, Kede, Ngumawa, Namjin Devatar, Wambuta, Number Shebata, Migi Ombuna, Neombusera, Migi number Shana, Mishukanga Chagura, Kansala Sopa, Nam Rangi Ngwe, Yenga Sojing or Yenas. Ranking way to be Kawa and Gaba and draw the one of Sobakarina. It Tashi can go dance. Tashi can go very best to grow Talemai, Shalaman, Yilmai, Taldosa. Tatunji Ribala Sobe, Tekunanula Chube, Ribe, Kansada, Kawa Kain, she says, Sevana, Nebarton Din, she says, Sevara. Niekuba she in a tether, many picture that are ranking way Mebata. Ranshingi. Tomba Yembar Sonsos, what is your lotion? As a Maloshan, as you do.
So here then, and this is going to sort of reiterate some of what we have already heard, but we now turn to how phenomena exist and really giving the kind of scriptural citations for this as well. So here, when we negate like objective existence and existence from its own side, still being able to posit things as being functional, this is the point that we are getting to here. And so when you search for the imputed object, you do not find it. As in, according to the essentialists, if things exist, they would have to have that kind of objective inherent existence. And so if you don't find them, that would mean they're utterly non-existent. But according to Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way and Chandrakirti's entering the middle way, essentialists assert that the sensory faculties, consciousness, person, and so forth, essentially exist, being produced and ceasing by their own essence. So here, like our sensory faculties, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and so forth, all of those, as well as our consciousness, the person, all of these phenomena must essentially exist, as in being produced and ceasing objectively or in their own right. However, so when we look at things like a pillar or a pot or a person, we should be able to point to them and say, this is it. But if that were so, if this were so, you would be able to analyze production, the person, and so forth, with reasons that investigate reality, like the ones that have been presented above, the four alternatives produced from self, from other, both self and other, or neither, and the sevenfold analysis, as we went through, and so forth, and find them very clearly and be able to say with certainty, this is it. However, this is not what you discover after such analysis. So if it were the case that phenomena existed in their own right, and essentially as these essentialists exist, we should be able to find them, to be able to point to them when we engage in this kind of reasoned analysis.
Oh yeah. That amade kung lu changi ora. That yemba yan daughter be shigeba drevana sung shas. Yeshi that number cheba na se. Rangwine yona, rangwine yoba de kawi yesi sheba chena. Raya yomarwa. Yu dang wangbu dang. Tati yu kanga yu. Su cha ti ro reksha chu shingura. Wangbu tala migi wangbu, na wangbu, ne wangbu, chi wangbu, lu wangbu, yi wangbu shingura. Wangbu tala tembe namshi tala migi number sheba. Su tonga migi number sheba. Cha tebe ne number sheba. Chi sorwe ne number sheba. Che number sheba, lu number sheba. Namshi tu yor. Nanzi long che che tala tu yora. Su cha ti ro reksha chu sta yu tala ya. Chibe yu tala tu che. Ne wangbu tala miki wangbu, na wangbu, ne wangbu, chi wangbu, lu wangbu, yi wangbu che. Wangbu tu yora. Tala te namshi tala miki number sheba, na number sheba, ne number sheba, che number sheba, lu yi number sheba tu yora. O tezo kangal pa chara. O teche teda na rikbe number sheba na wangbu tang, yu tang, number sheba namla yube ngo mebe rangi ngo chuba me do se. Tezo kangal ya rangi ngo chuba yomba ngo chuba yone che ne ta ra gorwa. Yadin di nam rangi ngo chuba yuna ni teche tebe number sheba na rikbe number teju ji rikbe number sheba na che sebu che chen dire sha su tengyu chi ko de se. Seware chidar nebe ngo yoba nidu mikban juwa shine mikban ya mayi de. Teche rang shingi tongo se rangune yobe tongbare rangune me de se. She jawa tubu she song so ya o teche la shana. Tangma she sar chi ba.
So, however, that's not what you discover after such an analysis. You discover only the lack of essential existence and the emptiness of inherent existence. So searching in this way, trying to find such an inherent existence, you can't find the thing itself. So in this vein, Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas states, when reason analyzes in this way, no essential nature is found existing in the sensory faculties, objects, or consciousnesses. So here we have our sense faculties, all the way from our visual faculties, our auditory, all the way up until the mental faculty, as well as the objects of those. So we have forms and sounds and smells, tastes, touch, and mental objects. And then we have the consciousnesses. So there is the visual consciousness and all the way up until our mental consciousness. And so we apply this kind of analysis to all of those, looking at them, trying to find the thing existing by some kind of essential nature or having some sort of essential existence. They're not to be found. If they existed essentially, reasoned analysis would clarify, would be able to find and sort of point out that essential existence, but it does not. Therefore, they are established as empty of intrinsic nature. So if it were the case that this reasoned analysis could get at that thing, we could find that sort of objective existence, we should be able to point to it clearly. This is it. However, we find that such analysis leads to realizing they're empty of an intrinsic nature.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Atanas. Thank you, the Rangibas in Yora. Thank you, Logan Tower Travel. Thank you, Atana Miso Rangune Meres. Chiri Yobares, what you con do a long Mamutan Sheswa. kondo sheba tar te khonani la chebe rigba nam je chö nam rangwene yoba yoba rangshin ki yoba tselne ti yona ani de kabando se tse yorese yoba chwar chese te dar chebe mani bana ngobo na range ngoyo truba rigba te da gen gokwa songe ta rigba ka se de rangwene yona kaba yos te tsene ta mindo aside ne rangwene yoba de rigba pa ka are mato yoba de rigba ka ma rese go ra ta de kir ade chibur chiri leje number me baro leje chumde yokura leje number me drebu migla sokbe wombo rwa tenje drebar joge kenga so megoches teda ne yoba yembe tanye do yobe leje drebu migla sokbe yobar so tanye do leje chumde la sokba rwa leje drebu pumbu ta wombo la sokba tezu kanga yoba so de se o techi lo sana.
So, here, then, for the Prasangikas, and we need to distinguish the Prasangika Madhyamakas from the Svatantrika Madhyamakas. So the Prasangikas falling after Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita and so forth. Although eyes and so forth do not exist from their own side, they do exist in general. So as explained above, you search with reasoning, analyzing reality for existence by intrinsic nature, or from the side of phenomena. So when you do not find this when searching for it in that way, this refutes phenomena existing by their own essential nature. But this does not refute the production and so on that is the dependent arising of the eyes and so on that are the fruit of karma. So here again, when we are using this reasoning analysis in order to refute objective existence, that refutes that kind of objective inherent existence, but not mere existence, does not refute the kind of dependent arising of our eyes and so forth that are the results of karma. And so here again, because from Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 stanzas, because our analysis is intent on seeking intrinsic nature, we refute here things that exist essentially. We do not refute that eyes and such are products and are dependently arisen results of karma.
Oh yeah. Atama de kung changyora da chibur dari an dawa drbe sigaben dreba lese ko cha ge number che banese takshe che de uma te yoga cheba chen ka ba yo ka ba se de sora rangshi che wa lur che ba nge rangshi de truba yo na te kare se ti te wa de so chi yo de se ko cha ne de ngo bo nam range ngo truba go gi yor ma to migla so ba che se te je de bar jo le ge number me bala so ba te zo ka yo ma re so gora che so ba ta ro se ya ti chi lam na de tama chama de ra che songa ba sung shabati na lun pi lamri na sung shabati de kung de do se che ti kung da de su chang gi ora oh yeah.
So these are the same kind of sources that are cited by Gelamo Tsongkhapa in his stages of the path, his great stages of the path. And so here, I accidentally read ahead, but to this quotation from Chandrakirti's commentary to the 400 verses says that because our analysis is intent on seeking intrinsic nature, we refute here things that exist essentially. We do not refute that eyes and such are products and are dependently arisen results of karma. So again, these are quotations and texts that Gelamo Tsongkhapa relies on in his stages of the path.
Oh yeah. 다시 땡고 지르베 지르게 와서 맹고 봤다 대치버라 해본 것이 시주야 다시 땡고 리버드게 깨와가요 그래서 깨와대 연아 디시나 수트 따티마도 깨워요 말 따티시디 가서도 깨와가자를 송거라 근데 말에서 tonga baso 주시나 다시 깨와가야 되게 지르 깨와고요 말에서 랑은에 주베 깨와가요 말도 깨와고요 말에서 디시요나 다시 깽고지를 배치를 깨와서 맹고봐. 대등모부 남랑식이 깨와 랑원에 깨와 영담배 깨와요나. 네 달래기 그러다 셀래기 그래 니래기 주밀래기 다시 깽고 달로서 이거 발에 대다 강도야 매배 영담배 깨와 고바 인지스티 영담배 깨와 랑원에 주배 깨와 이거요레스. 영담라 주배 리고 남기 지리 규진지 do chebe, some young watch maybe, don't but temper do none, your Koran Kabaras in the Mandu. The Dana Ngobo Nam Drebu Keve, Chawachini Tombango, Moshamji Pudar, USA. Because there's a Chirikyo Kaba in any Ngobokanga Mab Sadura, Ngobokanga Mab Redwood. In any Moshamji Punashi is what you say. Then it's Chebe Tarlo and the Chetares, Jibatan Dembar, Chebe Tarlo and Jiboyores. You had the data timber message, the data timber message, Rangune Mab the Mabos, or today the timber mother, Yeshi Mesawara. Nam Giwa, Chidar Rangune, Yover Naya, Tadar Nawa Tatu Meba, Tadar Nawa Tatu Meditation to Drebuki Chawa, Chinuji, Jumala Sobatada, Chawa Cheber Sosos, Jumala Sobatada and Java Chawa Cheto with the essay. Drepung Rana should that this on him after the Marese. Now and I shit temper your mother, the inner Kuchumakora Yora. Now and I shit temper your marmato. The Dara she gave in the ballet. The number cheva, D, Kawa number Tamzeto. Oh, your number Tamzeto. Kakbale, Duje Kawa Meba Temper Donane. They say, Jumatabu Nito, Minjurge. Jumatabu Sudokochina, Juma Yobali, and no one to Betim Basil Sigora. No one in Meba in any Jumatabu Segura Marise. Moshamji Putabu, Remo Ratabu, what in do this, Sigora. Minjurge, Moshamji Pula Soba, Taki Shavar and Jua Shina, say. Agent Deborah Jua Meba Tower and you and Zibe. The data timber messages, Moshamji Puna, she said, Meba said that Tungamese. Yeshi Messura. Jumala Soba Dada and Cheto, Jumadabure. You made that a long bush, not to hear the coil. No one I see you, Amara. Now I thought to it. Don't number mess. Just some better also. What you
So here, then we turn next to the section, refuting production via the four alternatives does not refute production per se. So we saw above that there are those who think that if you refute production by these four alternatives, then that would refute production at all in any way. And according to Tsongkhapa, that is not a kind of correct way to understand this. So if things had production by their intrinsic nature, production from their own side, or ultimate production, then they would have to have production from themselves, other, both self and other, or causelessly. So these are the four alternatives introduced in the first verse of Nagarjuna's treatise on the Middle Way, which was cited near the end of the last chapter. As things are not produced from any of those, ultimate production is refuted. And so some extend this, as we saw above, extend this reasoning analyzing the ultimate to say that it also reveals an emptiness that refutes even the mere production of phenomena from causes and conditions. But if this were so, functional things would not be functional, as they would be empty of the ability to produce effects. For, like the son of a barren woman, they would be utterly non-existent. As this would lead to the dire extreme of nihilism, we should avoid this view. And so here, the production we are refuting is the production that seems to exist from its own side, which is how it ordinarily appears to us. It does not truly exist in the way that it appears. Yet composite things perform functions and produce effects, just like magicians' illusions and so forth are able to produce effects. And so here, it's not the case that refuting production from the four alternatives or from the four extremes refutes production per se. Things generally kind of exist, and we can see that this is the reason why the example of an illusion is used. An illusion is something that exists, but it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. If it were the case that there were utterly no production of phenomena whatsoever, then they would use the example of something utterly non-existent, like the son of a barren woman, or a sky flower, or a rabbit's horn. But here, it's not the case that phenomena are are utterly non-existent, but rather they are like illusions. So then in this same vein, the commentary on the 400 stanzas by Chandrakirti again says, Aryadeva means that compounded phenomena lack production because this analysis refutes all forms of production. And the reply to that is that, well, no, that's not correct. In that case, the production of compounded phenomena would not be said to be like a magician's illusion. Rather, we would use examples such as the son of a barren woman to illustrate how production exists. Wary of the absurd implication that dependent arisings would not exist, we avoid such comparisons. Instead, we compare the production of things to a magician's illusion and so forth, examples that do not contradict dependent arising. So here, the example of an illusion is something that exists, but it doesn't, and appears, but it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. And this too is like the production of phenomena. It's not production per se that's being negated, but that kind of production in its own right, objective production that is being negated.
Oh yeah. 다시 째내 줘나 군좀 좀 메로와. 지den게 당에 도서 간가 공부를 째고나 공부지지 가봐요래서 하마고는 째제 당제신의 때문에도 때문에서 원디르스 랍소나 하고 차르와 당제제요 뭐 공부 단다 가드르스는 메디셈 단다 메두스라 공부하고 차르와 다시 가르서 하마고서 다시 디르다스 메디테 알레 디르시르 오세 다시 가르스다 지된 타니엘이야 만디르와 다게 조아르마도 지된 타니엘이 제바제나니 샤야요 말에 대롱고 말에서라 단다디 제바제데 단담도 요나 가디임바 제바제요 아르마도 지된 타니엘도 강바요나 강바가 그래서제 단타니 제바제요 말에서라 다시 째내 조는 군좀 좀 메로와서 네 군좀 남샤 롱고 말에 지된 마다 마제바 코라 맹지 따서 다가란 차샤 로고르마도 로변 로둑라 소바 오마 탱교 남제 실람 드레비 남샤 제바 남메 시스드 히 남샤 템바실라 소바 템바니르서 코라 케시디스오라 메타바레다 카레스 케시디스 시제 람스드 람들라 탑다 시름니오라 시 템바니스르다 남주체다 군주타 던담베 템바니라 던담베 템바테 또네 냠모다 또주 시에치도라 군주베 템바텔레 레 좀레다 참바다 세와라 소바테 주 남샤샤야도 달야 이용거라 시제 람들라 탑시니세 시럽디 동반이 또베 시럽라 소바 시제 내주 시베 시럽도 줄야 시럽시거라 띠고여라 탑시도 참바다 닝지 세와 그와 샹레 차와 빵발라 소바 장주게 셈라 소바 상베 차들야 탑시거라 탑디 상베 차다 시럽 니님도 고요래 시럽 장장 전에는 상부면에는 골로제 녀가도 무슨 대사로 좀 망부전다 메다셴네 아니 벤잠불이 코라 녀가 소야tin데 녀가 요라 그 상부디메 오 밀치솔인데 그래 삼도 삼을 때는 소구마로 왔다분에 야고 그치솔은 내가 소고 삼고요라 저다 하고도 소샤요라 이 녀가 쳐버려 되어라 자 도바 lumba mam부와 텐데 연구도 가져라 미디 마신게 되 시단 골로제 게 요마로 다신게 도저니 강가체 골로제 밀고고 다 강가티니 녀가 침부요라 삼바 상부메나 탑도 시럽니 세티레 시럽니 빼게 쳐버려 시럽디 고아로와 개념도 탑상부 차데 지솔 팬바다 네바다 이게 미드도 심지엔도 사토나시 임베 삼루티 메아고라 오 소소나시 잠바다 차와 초하티도 냥게레 삼도 삼루치요고라 얘네 그 삼루 땅기라 대상마다 아니 냥게 첨부에서 탑도 시럽니에세 드레부들레 아니 가르서라 시템바니 남타이 드레부꾸니스그라 주부터 수군이세라 주부세도 소수 시럽지 차가 소수 강가 시바티스거라 시럽지 차 공부할 때는 꽤 강가 빵 연대 던지 시바들레 주부세라테 수구세대 상부 공부할 때는 미치졸 팬트 최송 통계 강사가 남바 때는 미치졸을 파치 수치 나는 제번전에 최송신게도 산게 좀 된데 뭐 누구로 와 어디 상부 연대를 장장 정하네 그 나게 또뭐 반도 연대 다시 치료파 미치졸 팬도시에 되고 거라 레부티 시템바니 람탑신이 레부꾼이 있어도 어디 시거라 Shilam Drebu Namsha Zeba Namni Tekonangila Chube Rigbe Mada Machebar Jobare. Mawa Namda Tekonangila Chube Rigbe Chene Jona Chudeda Tekonangidu Trubam Yondamba Truba Jobare. Tetar Jobe Chudedani Tangedu Yabada Kunzudu Yaban Minjurgis. Takche Chene Rasuna Tila Tangedu Yaba Sigmar, Kunzudu Yaba Sigmar, Yondamba Yaba Sigre. Tanyeba Zambi Shabo Mare. Don't dumber Yone Koya Shaku Yardo. The Dan Joban Chudedani Tangedu Yabada Kunzudu Yaban Minjurgi. De Konanula Chube Rigbe. Jena Jigdengi Tangedu Yebe Chukanya Jo Minibar. Tangeta Yambar Euros. Jigdengi Tangeti Madame Majeba Koran Jigdenla Yons Tragwa, the Nashi Kelly and Robert Mado. Kilecheba Chigden, Tangi Namsari Mare. Kilecheba Jenichi Rava in a dit turned down by your Tanya to Yoba Sigmare Segura. What did she?
So then we have this next section, which is on the ways of conventions are not feasible if posited after analysis. So here, when it comes to again those sorts of prasangika masters, prasangikas such as the master Nagarjuna, present presentations of the basis, the path, and goal without investigating with the reasoning, analyzing the ultimate. So here, when it comes to like the level of sort of conventional understanding, if we say like, oh, that's Tashi, you know, oh, this is a house, and so forth. If someone were to say, oh, really, that's Tashi? Like, where exactly is Tashi? We might kind of think they're crazy. Like, if they're trying to go beyond just the conventions of the world, that might seem like they're a little bit over the top. So here, when it comes to the conventions, the conventional reality is posited with a kind of understanding of the conventional. It isn't something that is posited after investigating into the kind of ultimate reality of things. When we talk about, oh, this is a house, this is Tashi, this is Tundrup, we're not speaking about having analyzed ultimately, but rather understanding them as conventionalities. So here, when it comes to the presentations of the basis, the path, and the goal, here the basis is normally encompassed with a kind of understanding of the four truths and the two levels of truth, understanding on the one hand ultimate truth, the emptiness of phenomena, as well as their kind of conventional level of existence, developing that good side, the kind of love and compassion for others. So again, the basis level of those two truths then leads into the path level of wisdom and compassion, having both method and wisdom. So just having a kind of knowledge of the way that things are isn't sufficient. And we can see this definitely in the world today, that there are those that are pursuing knowledge, pursuing a kind of understanding of the way that things are, but they don't develop simultaneously that side of goodness. And in this way, we can see how people use knowledge as a kind of way to harm or deceive others, because they're only thinking about the knowledge side of things, of like knowing, and they don't have that kind of the method side. So we need to both have method and wisdom. Our kind of understanding of the way that things are and our investigation should be grounded in that kind of compassion or that goodness that doesn't just view others as like rocks or stones, but sees that they're feeling beings. And it is on the basis of that combined practice of method and wisdom that one then gains the goals, the resulting Dharmakaya, the truth body, which sort of comprises the knowledge of a Buddha, as well as the form body, that which allows us to then teach to other sentient beings, to be able to interact and communicate to them the knowledge that we have. So here, for essentialists, getting back to the text, essentialists posit only like the basis, path, and result, or basis, path, and goal only after investigation with the reasoning analyzing the ultimate. But in the latter case, say the prasangikas, you would have posited those phenomena as ultimately established or established in reality. And as we have seen, phenomena that are posited in this way cannot exist conventionally or nominally. For when you investigate with the reasoning analyzing the ultimate, you are unable to posit any phenomena that exists in the conventions of the world. And these conventions conventionally existent phenomena would then become non-existent. So here, for essentialists, they say that for something to be existent, we need to be able to find it, to be able to say that it really, truly, ultimately exists. Whereas for prasangikas and prasangika madhyamakas, they would say that for something to exist as a conventionality would mean that you don't find it when you analyze using the reasoning, analyzing the ultimate. Conventionally existent phenomena are only conventionally existent because they haven't been sort of analyzed or undermined by that kind of reasoning, analyzing the ultimate.
Yeah. 어디 농장교라 다시제는 지된베 타냐 냠루레스 데 공장교라 나와 작베 시게벤 데발레스 넘버 제바 제나니 지된베 타냐 냠바르교데스 지된베 타냐데 가리네 밍다서 다가 차샤 오면 뜰 제바 지게나니 타냐데라요 말레스 거라 타냐도 요바 차고 말레스 거라 놀래 베나 싱다 귤레 땡체네스 담예 당게르 치네 싱지요라 네 뜰이야 따르든데바 따셔라 ne lakbe tinte che tra che tongurwa ne ke nyambu che nyambu ko ya yora pene singda gyula tension ne lakba tsuwa che ba sumchona lakba chen de shen gurwa ko lakba ya wo shen ne tamye nyambu yungurwa piwa tangi na kari tangi na changma sumchona troje piwa lingbu la sole troje piwa ina da lingbu tangi ina da tezule ne tra nyambu yungurwa yungule 다 레지 자연 좋아져 자연부터 좋은게 송비와라 그다음에 자연 좋아져 얘네 개발할래 따져 돼서 어디다 얘네 봐들 따져 지기나 얘네 자연 좋아니 맨줄셔라 개발 쪽 따져 지기나 얘네 자연 얘네 개발할래 따져 돼 자연 좋아니 맨줄셔 개발할 어디 자연 부시부지 좋아서 가네 여기도서는 dinde tingsam mambuch doa dinde chera titanya bud kane yongore kare sena rae yo maro te ke yo maro jide tanya la tanya budu samti nyaje taga shower mado tanya bud kande chongore kagire se shingni mare tarde mare laban mare ke rae yo maro odisa keba lale ta che de tene kane honshika tanya bud kane yongore se tatanda kawado mendo kawayo resena 이렇게 주세요 말에 냠부 소리 되니 저도 저 살았다 저거를 마도 이 지대 단계를 계시해요 말아 초다 초점권도 따지나 자유원 로아님은 주 초다 초점 가지는 되게 단계부터 라예요 말이셔라 제다서 세양 주디는 오모 주변 대반나라 된데도 대변나 로변 남지 현재 떠봐서 유튜브에 보내 주변 넘버 샤본자도스 Uma tenju aga penju chichila tene. Ani truba de yoba number shawa. Tende truba la tene te yoba number shawa yore chera. Penju tebal tene. Truba de te namshaje yore. Tene te kona dar teme sao ke lambar chade. O te taga nashi. Uma tenju asya nashi. Penju tene namshache te ke lankure chera. Teda mayena kunjub teba dan demba minjuru se. Te mayena ne kunjub tutu. 샤주 마다 마제바 타냐 샤주 망부지 조토 마레세 대외나 대코난이도 대나 대코난이도 조르기 군주도 menjuru 제바 제네 치제네 라니 샤그데네 대 타냐도 여바스 마레 타냐도 여바스 타냐게 왕게 남샤샤샤스 고가라 타냐게 왕게 남샤샤샤도 멤버지 제네 치란 데르세치나 랑웨네 투바 담바 투베 남샤르 마소 타냐게 왕게 샤바리 요 마레 타냐 요한게 샤바 마임바 유랑원에 여버트 요라 대코나니도 조지 군주도 menju로세 제바타로세 야 어디실라나
So here, then continuing in the text, it says here, as Chandrakirti states in his explanation of entering the middle way, when you use analysis, the conventions of the world are destroyed. So here, if you're trying to subject these conventional designations to analysis of the ultimate, they would be destroyed. So as it says in the sutras, for instance, when the three come together, the moving hand and the instrument's wood and strings, they produce a sound arising from the instrument, the lute, flute, and so on. So when you have like a dranyan, some kind of guitar, guitar or something like that, and a skilled musician can make beautiful music. But if you then get some sort of a scholar who comes along and tries to find, and we find there are those who are trying to do this these days, they're trying to find, like, well, where is that sound coming from? So then some scholars analyze this, saying, from where does this come and to where does it go? When they investigate in all the cardinal and intermediate directions, they do not find the coming or going of sound. And so here, when someone tries to search for that thing, this kind of noise, this beautiful noise as they are hearing it, they can't actually find that thing. You can't point to it like as existing in the strings of the instrument or in the hands of the musicians, but rather it's something that came about due to those aggregation of causes and conditions. It's only contingently existent, but something that is fundamentally existent in and of itself is not to be found when you go through this kind of analysis. So if someone were to look for it saying, well, where does it come from? Where does it go? You can't actually find that thing. And so too, Chandrakirti's clear words states, therefore, the master is presented as being established from the perspective of existing by mere interdependence. So like that beautiful sound, it exists only through that mere interdependence. We assert this without any doubt, just as it is. Were it otherwise, either conventional phenomena would not be possible, or they would be ultimately established, but not conventionally existent. So here, if it were the case that you had to be able to find something that were that conventional thing, then actually conventional phenomena would not be possible, and they would be then ultimately existent, as in, oh, I can find that thing, it's ultimately established, and then they're no longer conventionally existent. So conventionally existent means existent only due to the power of convention. And if there were some kind of existence beyond that, or you could point to something, that would mean that they would be ultimately established but not conventionally existent.
Oh yeah, that is awesome.
No.
Yeah.
So we'll stop there as the time is up for today.
Thank you again, Rinpoche. And thank you for Katrina, for your skillful translations. And for those watching online, we have one more session with Genla in this series of teachings. And so we hope you'll join us again next Saturday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. We'll finish with some dedication prayers. Due to this May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losong's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Recording stopped.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mm.